or money, or VFM as it's called in the contracting out literature. You get a good deal. 2 for 1, 3 for 1, hurry for a limited time only. And all this squares with broader ideas of liberal individualism. It's a very idea to run arguments that say, gee, big government gets in the way, it's authoritarian, it tells you what you want to do, and you don't want any of that. So the market is where we'd all like to be. But I'm sorry, you can't be. As the Rolling Stones said, which makes me sound like a baby boomer rather than Generation X, which is what I am, you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you just might find you get what you need. And I'll sing it for you later, if you like. You need energy. Business needs energy, and the state government, not necessarily the state government, because they don't seem to be doing all that much, the state needs to ensure that you get it. The danger is naivety about what governments can provide. For example, consumer choice. There will be, and there is, no competitive market for energy. There'll be a handful of very large companies. There already are. You can name the energy companies, you know who they are. They decide what you get, and they decide how much you get of it and what price you get it at. You won't have the choice that you want to have in markets. Efficiency? Well, these companies want to sell you as much energy as possible at the lowest cost so they can make the biggest profits. Hooray, you might say, that's fantastic. Well, no, because what about sustainability? Sustainability means you have to sell less energy, or you have to sell more sustainable energy that costs more than what you might get from, say, a coal-powered fire station. So you're going to need a subsidy if that's going to change, or you're going to need government regulations. I'm afraid that consumers are not clamouring to buy sustainable energy at higher prices or clamouring to buy less energy. The market won't give you this. What about climate change? This means using less energy at higher prices again, and that won't happen unless the government mandates it, or taxes it, or intervenes in some kind of way. Rural and remote communities, if it was left to the market, it might be too expensive to supply them with energy at all, or the price might be so high that no one there could afford to buy it unless there was a government service obligation. Households on lower incomes, the market dictates that poor people sit in the dark or are cold. Because, after all, unless there was some kind of government intervention to modify pricing and services, again, the market won't provide them what they need. And finally, what about transparency and responsibility? In The Globalists, Dmitry Titkov looks at fracking, and I've been dying to use that word. He talks about the threats it suggests, environmental threats, threats to rural Australia, to our agricultural production, and he says the firms involved should become more transparent. They should fund more research into reducing the risks. Of course they should. Will they? No, they won't. Milton Friedman in 1970 famously said the business of business is business. That's what business does. That's what the market does. Makes profit. Dmitry finishes with a call for the following, and I'm sorry, Dmitry, I'm sort of having a go at you, but he's purely on the profits and the business case. So we know all this, don't we, really? It all sounds very familiar. Why are we having this debate? Let's unmask the market. Only a fool denies the power of the market. Of course they do, because the men, and indeed they are mostly men in suits, have great authority when they tell you what the market can deliver. They look important, they look like they know what they're talking about. What really happens in terms of policy is that they want to get their hands on the levers. And when it comes to delivering energy, they want to make profits. They'll talk about the market because they're not going to come in front of you and say, I've got a very big company and here's an opportunity to make a lot of money while also getting control of the policy settings and conditions under which I do business. No, they'll bang on about the market and what a lovely place it is because it's where we all want to be. I want to be there too. What about consumer sovereignty and efficiency? Let's face it, what about these, key pillars of mainstream economics? Let's face it, nobody likes competition. Everybody likes control. They like certainty. The companies want market share. They want to ensure their profits. They want a return on their investment. So here's the question. You want to buy power. Why would you want to do so from someone seeking to make as much as possible in the shortest period of time and as assuredly as possible? Why would you want them to drive the policy that ensures that they can do this? More of a reality. The reality is, as Ross said, that there isn't really a market that is free. There are very few markets with hundreds, thousands of entrepreneurial firms. What we have is what Stephen Vogel in 1996 said so well: we've got a case of freer markets with more rules. While markets are being deregulated, what's happened is that governments have got in and with the very large corporations have specified what they've got to deliver, how much of it, and at what price. So what's happened is that the business of business is no longer business, a la Friedman from 1970. The business of business is increasingly government. While some very critical, or say Marxist scholars, there you go, I said the M word, like to say neoliberalism, oh, it's so terrible, there's been a privatisation of so many things. No, I'd say there's been a publicisation. With very large corporations and government, what you have is government telling business how they should do things. You've got government and business working together. And this is to be expected. Why wouldn't they? Look at the geopolitics of energy. In the globalist, Jared Ellsmore explores the realpolitik of energy relations in Russia and Europe and says how Russia, having control of energy supplies, uses it as a geopolitical weapon against Eastern and Western Europe. Oh, but that's Russia, you might say. Come on, what relevance is this? Well, on the European side of things, you find that although the European Union wants to create a free and integrated market for energy, that the states of Europe really don't like this. The more the European Union says this is what they want, the more they get pushed back from the European Union member states. What about closer to home? When Chinalco wanted to buy a controlling stake in Rio Tinto a couple of years ago, all the talk about markets faded away as we realised this wasn't really in the national interest. Governments want to control energy, governments want to control the source of it, governments have an interest in doing so. In fact, my wife said a few years ago, this is sort of related, that when Air New Zealand was failing and was down to something like 1 cent a share or worth practically nothing, she said, we should buy up lots of shares in Air New Zealand. There's no way the government's going to let them fail. And of course, she was right. I'll give you this advice now. If the energy companies really get their hands on the policy levers, and if the market is really allowed to rule, whatever spare cash you've got, you should put into energy companies, because not only are they too big to fail, the function they serve is fundamental to all governments and all states. The lights can't go out because of market forces. The national economy can't shut down because of the animal spirits of market players. We're talking national infrastructure here. It's fundamental. This is what governments do. So, the market as a choice in energy policy and in energy delivery is a mirage. It's an idea, and it's certainly a powerful one. Now, I don't have a crystal ball, but looking at the history of contracting out and where there's been privatisation, which I would say is really publicisation of key infrastructure, transport, energy, electricity, you name it. This is what happens. The market players don't want competition, they want control. If they have the ability to set the policy prescriptions and the contractual basis on which they provide power services, they'll make sure they can capitalise on their gains and socialise their losses. You'll pay them for the power, and then you'll subsidise them when they make losses. The market in this case doesn't allow the government to tell you that if your lights have gone out, it's because business just wasn't competitive enough. So the government, which is to say you, will end up picking up the tab if everything falls over. It's a nice business to be in if you can be in it. So there is no marketplace to choose. The choice is between big companies, supported, subsidised, underwritten by government, or you might just say the government. Let's cut out the middleman. Either way, the government is central.